Discussed at the top of the show, state and federal leaders, including President Obama, are calling for police officers to wear body cameras. The incident with Eric Garner in Staten Island was, in fact, videotaped. So some question how much more effective body cameras might be in telling a story like this one. With me in the studio now to talk more about body cameras and how video is currently used in criminal cases is Tully Rinckey. He is an attorney from the firm Tully Rinckey, back with us. Thank you so much for your expertise. So this is something that you're seeing increasingly across the country and in New York, the use of video footage in criminal cases. Is it, from your perspective as an attorney, helpful?
I think it is helpful because it tells the whole story. When you have the video recording on a police officer, we're not just getting snippets from civilians that are recording parts of interactions with police and civilians. But when you have the actual camera on the police officer, you're seeing the whole incident, which is either going to make or break a story.
And it actually could be, some would argue, well, it's an invasion of the police officer's privacy or rights, or it would have some kind of impact on his or her ability to do his or her job. However, it also could work in that person's favor.
Absolutely. I mean, when a police officer is out in the public, they're out in the public anyhow. So to say that it's a violation of their privacy, I don't think is a good argument that they can make. And I agree with your statement that it can sometimes protect them because it's going to show the incident as it took place, and sometimes it's going to clear the police officer. So I think it can go both ways.
But right now we have a lot of police officers with cameras on their cars. So why is it that having it on your body, I guess in the instance of what we had in the Eric Garner case, which is to say, I'm not sure if there was a car in the vicinity, but a chase that ends with a takedown like the one that we saw, you're going to have a more wide view of what exactly took place.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times with the dashboard cam, the cop gets out of the car and then it's hard to really see what happens in the ensuing scuffle as to where if there's a camera on the body, especially if there's multiple police officers at the scene, you're going to get it from different angles as well.
Now, the thing is, we've subsequently heard since last night's decision by the grand jury not to bring criminal charges against the officer, we've heard some elected officials say, well, maybe we don't need these body cameras. I mean, they're not cheap, first of all, and they do bring into question a whole sort of question about how you bring it into evidence and if they could be tampered with, because of course technology is questionable. But there was video in this case, and there was not an indictment, which was the result that so many people wanted.
That's right. I mean, would a video camera have changed this if the police officer was wearing a video camera? It's hard to say. I think you'd probably get the same result even if the police officer was wearing a camera.
Is it difficult to use it? It must add another dimension in court.
It does, but I always find that jurors or grand jurors, they always like to see technology. They like to see, because the version of events, no matter if both people are telling the truth or think they're telling the truth, the versions are always going to not be the same. And the camera really kind of shows how events transpired. People's memories and people perceive and process things differently, and the camera really doesn't lie.
Right, so there was no camera in Ferguson. Now, we did have all this eyewitness testimony, and the eyewitness testimony, as we found after the jury made its decision not to bring any indictments, varied wildly, actually.
Very different, yes.
So some people said he did have his hands up, don't shoot. He didn't have his hands up, don't shoot. Do you believe in that case, had there been video, that the grand jury would have returned a different decision?
Well, it would depend on what the video showed. I mean, if the video showed that he had his hands up, well, I think yes. I mean, if the video showed what the police officer and some of the witnesses testified to is that there was an altercation in the car, it might have been the same result. So it's really hard to say because we don't know what happened.
I do want to talk a little bit about the grand jury proceeding, and we touched on this last night when Vin Bonventuri from Albany Law was in, but now we have a decision from a judge in Staten Island to release a very small amount of information. The DA, in this case Dan Donovan, didn't actually seek a lot of information compared to what we saw in Ferguson, which was reams of information. It's because the law differs here and in Missouri and actually everywhere. Are you surprised that the DA didn't ask for more? I'm
not surprised in New York. New York's grand jury process is very secretive. It's not a surprise to me that the DA didn't seek more release. of information.
Because the likelihood is that the result would have been no. I mean, the response would have been no, given the secrecy and the law that protects the secrecy of grand juries.
Probably so.
So
yeah.
what's the value of having that information out? I mean, we've seen this video now, I don't even know, thousands of times. Everybody's seen the video. I mean, do you not worry as an attorney that it taints the case going forward because people are able to see it and then form their own opinion? So many people in this case believe that what they watched was murder.
Well, that's always the problem with cases whenever there's evidence out there, whether it be video evidence or testimony that's sometimes released before a trial. People are going to perceive things and they're going to have their biases and they're going to have their beliefs as to what the outcome should be. But ultimately, it's the jury that hears all of the testimony that came in that grand jury proceeding, and they're the ones that make that decision.
But if, in fact, the video is then brought before the grand jury, and then again say that there are charges brought, is it more difficult as an attorney to bring that case because of the video? I mean, there's not as much room for error or for interpretation.
Well, I mean, it goes both ways. I mean, if the camera is going to show that the crime was committed, and the grand jury indicts, it's going to be a lot harder for a defense attorney to overcome that, yes. But sometimes things that are shown on a camera can be explained away by, other angles, if there are multiple police officers on the scene, that maybe one camera didn't pick up everything. So you deal with what evidence you have.
New York City is starting its pilot program this week in terms of body cameras, and the mayor and the police commissioner there believe that in fact it will improve transparency and accountability. Do you foresee down the road, as this becomes more popular and prevalent, that there have to be changes in the law to address unforeseen glitches or problems that might come up as video becomes more prevalent?
Well, the law is always evolving. There's always going to be the case out there where someone's going to say the tape was tampered with,
right.
The tape was missing, the cop shut the camera off or it flew off. The law is inevitably going to evolve with cameras on police officers, but I think it does make it more transparent. I think it does also reflect on the police that they know that they're being taped. I mean, so I think it's a good thing for them as well because it can also protect them. So I think it works for the public, and I think it also works for the police.
And you believe that also it would cause behavioral changes, both for the people that the cops are dealing with and for the cops themselves?
Absolutely. I think if you know that you're being filmed, I think that your behavior is going to change.
So as an attorney, would you recommend to individuals that they keep in mind that it's possible that they're always on camera?
Well, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, in this world, in this environment, there's cameras everywhere. Whether you're driving down the street, you're in the mall, you're being filmed.
And that's something that's actually could be problematic, though. I mean, again, could you get back, if you would, to the idea of tampering or glitches? I mean, again, the technology is attached to a police officer. In a scuffle, could be knocked aside, could be, in fact, turned off. That's possible?
Well, I don't know the technology they're going to use, but I'm assuming that the technology, there's always a way to defeat it. There's going to be a way where, some officers are not going to want to wear it, and when they're involved in a scuffle, it's going to get knocked off. And then the argument is going to be made that the cop knocked it off so that he could assault the individual. I mean, there's going to be all sorts of different permutations of the camera issue, because let's face it, a camera, from what I see, it's going to be mounted on the shoulder or on the epaulette, and if you're running, it's not going to be, I mean, it's not affixed really to the police officer, and he's not in a desk job where he's just sitting there. He's involved in a scuffle. There's going to be problems with the technology.
Before I let you go, I am curious, were you surprised by the decision? I mean, after viewing that video and knowing what we know in terms of the reporting, and again, we were not inside the grand jury, and we may never know, we probably never will know what evidence was presented. Were you surprised that the grand jury came back with no charges? I
was not very surprised by the finding of the grand jury. Based on the history that I've seen with grand juries, Staten Island, I was not very shocked that they came back with no true bill.
Would it have been different had the location been different? Do you think Staten Island had something to do with it?
Well, I don't. It really depends. I mean, I think if there was other locations, yeah, it could have come back differently.
Yeah, just to remind people who may not be aware, Staten Island is the 5th borough and is also probably the most conservative borough in New York City, which is a Democrat-dominated city, obviously, but it's home to a lot of firefighters and police officers. So it perhaps had some kind of influence, and some people believe, but we may never know. I thank you so much,
My
Mr. Rinckey,
pleasure.
for coming in. It's always good to see you.
Great.